Hi, in this chapter we are going to look at the sixth move f4 in the knight order. Position arises after moves e4, c5, our Sicilian, knight after d6, d4, the open Sicilian, as you know it, takes, f6, knight c3, a6, and here the move f4. Now the move f4 is not at the top of the list in terms of being the most popular, neither amongst the top players, nor exactly the top choice in the amateur or club practice, but it's really out there still. There are plenty of games, and from my personal experience, the people who play f4 usually do so more than once. So I don't really know why that is, but it's my personal experience. One way or the other, we have to know how to deal with this move. And it is not very complicated. Here we play with e5. Now, after e5, in general, this move f4, as I mentioned in the chapter with bishop e2 as well, when the bishop is still on c8, the move f4 is not the most dangerous, because the move f5, which is the logical follow-up, does not come with a tempo, which wouldn't be the case if the bishop was on e6. And so this f4 system, it feels to me as though white has determined his pawn to f4 a tad too early. That said, of course, it is a reasonable way of playing. Here, mostly white plays knight f3. That's also the idea. The knight is harmoniously placed behind the pawn. But there are also other moves here. So there is a move at knight f5. It's a very risky move, but actually I faced it once when I was little, and I actually even prepared for my opponent, and he played this repeatedly. It's a interesting looking move. Now the idea is obviously that if we take knight takes e4, white takes knight takes g7, and after bishop g7 he takes back on e4, and it gets very messy. Here I prepared to move knight c6, and to my surprise, this is still the best move according to even the modern computers. Now my opponent played f takes e5 here. Now I took on e4. Now the position is a little more open than after a take on g7, bishop g7, knight e4. Black has queen h4 check. I believe in the game I gave a queen a5 check and took on e5 with the queen, which is also pretty fine. But queen h4 is stronger, and now after knight f2, bishop e5. We have a tremendous position. White king is currently stuck in the center. We want to play bishop to e6 here, and the king to c8, castle long. And white is struggling with his king. Wherever he castles, be it short or the long side, he's in quite a bit of danger due to this very strong bishop on e5. Instead of going back a few moves, instead of f takes e5, which is what my opponent played, his name is, by the way, Jasper Broekmeulen, he's a Dutch amateur, big fan of chess. Instead, bishop c4 is objectively better, but here, after takes queen a5, which happened in two correspondent games. I don't really recall the names. I think Wolodarsky was playing with white against Baldwin and Gluhovtsev. He lost both his games here. Black is doing very well. White cannot castle because of the queen c5 check, and so he has to waste one more move. And Black has excellent control of the d5 square here, and white is really not going to be able to pose us any problems here. So the move knight f5 not very good, also not very popular. Knight b3 was played against me by Hikaru Nakamura in an online blitz game. Now the point is that after bishop e7, which would be extremely logical here, after bishop e7, white can take on e5, g5, and go for an interesting endgame, queen takes d8. It is a round balance, but white can still fight for advantage here. So I propose to play the clever move knight c6, which is also what I played. The idea is to be able to recapture on e5 with the knight. And here it seems that white doesn't have a good follow-up. If he plays f5, once again, this should not be dangerous. As a rule in the knight of when our bishop is not on e6 and f5 comes without a tempo, usually we have just enough time to strike back in the center. And here we do so by first developing the bishop. Now if white tries to fight for the d5 square with bishop g5, then we have a tactic knight takes e4. Typical tactic, obviously, if white takes the bishop, we take on c3, and then we take the queen. And if white recaptures on e4, which is a better move, we take on g5, knight d6, king e7, and we have tremendous dark square control. White is lucky to have queen h5 attacking both the bishop and the f7 pawn. And now we take on d6, queen g5, and queen f6. Our king is just very safe here, safeguarded by the queen. And the f5 pawn is very, very weak. And bishop g5 is not working. Instead of white tries to play for g4 with the idea g5. Now this doesn't quite work out here. We play h6. A good motive to remember. It's almost always good to include h6, h4 for black, because it gains us some time after h4. White does not threaten g5 any longer, because after we take, he cannot recapture because the rook is hanging. So essentially this h6, h4 inclusion gains us a tempo, and that happens in many different line of positions, not only here. And so here we have some time, and we use that to play a5, a very strong move. A good move to know, not the usual solution, but here it's very strong. We threaten a4, kicking the knight away, gaining this square for our knight on d4. But if white plays a4, which is logical, now we plant our knight on b4, and the knight on b4 is doing an excellent job supporting the d5 push, and also hitting the c2 pawn, which could be quite relevant in some of the lines. For example, after bishop g2, we play here queen b6, and we already threatened some tricks with knight takes g4. And if queen takes, we take on c2, and the knight on b3 is hanging as well. So here white is just not quite in time with his g5 push. If he pushes g5 at the end, there is the issue on g1 after we capture on g5 and on h1 first. So f5, again, it should not really work, and it doesn't. Instead, on move 8, bishop e2 is what Hikaru played against me. Bishop d3 is also possible. It is quite similar. The bishop is not exactly better on d3 than e2. It's equally passive. So after bishop e7, castle, castle, just normal development. If white now tries to push f5, and if not, what else? Because we might at some point capture on f4, especially after a move like bishop e3, and then establish a strong knight on e5. So f5 something we should be aware of. Now we play knight b4. We want to push d5, obviously, and if white plays a3, then we take the bishop, and after queen d3, we can start with b5, but we can also start with h6, stopping bishop g5, and we've got this light squared bishop, which will ensure that we have excellent control over the d5 square and put pressure on the e4 pawn. And this is what really these positions are all about: this control over the d5 square. So that's for bishop d3. Bishop e2 is what Hikaru played against me, and now quite well, remarkably or unremarkably, I don't know. After bishop e7, castle, castle, and king h1, which is the most natural move, stepping out of this this diagonal, we landed in a position that can arise from the sixth move, bishop e2, e5, knight b3 move order, and this position is examined in that chapter. There we play rook e8, which is a very clever waiting move. As you remember, we are waiting for bishop e3, after which we'll grab on f4 and make white lose the tempo with the bishop, or we're waiting for the f5 push, against which we start quick counterplay with b5. So not e takes f4 here, or bishop e6, which both would be suboptimal, but rook e8 first. If not king h1 in this position, but direct f5, then we go for b5, and the e4 pawn is in trouble. Once again, the f5 push without gaining a tempo is, as a rule, premature. That's for knight b3. Again, the only real point is that bishop e7 allows this endgame. So we start with knight c6 and then proceed with bishop e7. That's the idea. So knight f3 is by far the most popular move. There's also the idea of starting with f4, traditional idea. So here, we play knight b7. It's also possible to play queen c7 here first, but I think knight b7 gives white more room to make a mistake, and is a more flexible move. We are not afraid of the move bishop c4 just yet, and that is because we have here the b5 push. If white retreats with bishop b3, we simply play bishop e7 and just develop, and the e4 pawn is quite weak. The bishop on b3 does not do any particular task, and unlike when the bishop is on d3, here the pawn on e4 is not well defended. So instead, white can try to play bishop d5 and start some direct assault, but it doesn't quite work either. We just play rook b8 first, and now we want to finish our development with bishop e7 and short castle, and if white jumps at us with knight g5, and then we don't panic, we grab the bishop, and after queen d5, we do not allow a mate in one here, but we better than that, we play queen e7, protecting the f7 pawn, and next we want to push back white's aggressive pieces. We want to push at some point h6. We might push b4 as well, kicking this knight away too, and obviously we'll kick the queen back as well from d5 with knight f6, and after that we bring the queen from e7 to c7 or even a7 depending on the situation, and then finish development with bishop e7 and short castle. Basically we are clumsy at this point in time with the queen on e7, but we will unwind very quickly. So this bishop c4 is premature because of b5, and that is why starting with knight d7 is good, and there is no need for early queen c7 move. Here white can also start with bishop d3, but he should better start with the move a4 first, because here we have the extra option of b5. We could also just play bishop e7 and castle, and when white anyway has to go for a4, but I like to use the inaccurate move order with b5. Now after castle, bishop e7, we have already expanded a little bit on the queen side, and that is quite nice. If white proceeds with his usual plan, which is queen e1, sending the queen to g3, now we can castle, and after king h1, which is in general move white always wants to make. It's a very useful move. Whenever the pawn is on f4, king always wants to move out of this diagonal as a rule. Now here we play bishop b7. Already some b4 moves are in the air, and after a3 we play for example rook e8, ready to meet f5 with d5, and we put a lot of pressure on the e4 pawn, and we're happy to have expanded on the queen side with b5, a6, and have a very good place for our bishop on b7. So bishop d3 not ideal. Best move for white after bishop d3 castle, b5 castle, bishop e7 is the move a4. White is trying to provoke some action before, and now knight d5, and after knight takes d5, e takes d5 castle. We have a comfortable position, but it should be around level. White can play queen e2 here, for example, hitting the e5 pawn, and then we counterattack the d5 pawn, and after takes fe5, bishop takes d5, a lot of pawns in the center are getting traded, and the position gets simplified. Black is very comfortable, but white should not be much worse either. So that's for bishop d3, but much more accurate is the move a4. And here, first of all, obviously the idea of a4 is to stop the b5 push, and here by far the most popular move is bishop e7, very logical, trying to develop the kingside pieces first. But that allows an extra option of a bishop to c4, which is quite unpleasant actually. When we cannot kick this bishop away with b5, the bishop stands quite well there. So instead, I'd like to recommend the move queen c7 here first. And I always thought that this is very well known and that everybody plays it, but to my surprise, this is played like 10 times less frequent than the move bishop e7. So something to take note of, and do play queen c7 first. Even the modern computers still agree that allowing bishop c4 is not a very good idea. Excuse me. Now, white has to go for bishop d3. There is no better square for the bishop now that c4 has been taken away. And here we finish development with bishop e7, castle, castle. By the way, the move queen c7 is anyway useful. We want to overprotect our e5 pawn and push for knight c5. So queen c7 is just better move order. And here, white usually plays king h1. He, once again, does not want to push f5, or, well, he wants to, but it's not very good because we push with b6 and follow up with bishop b7 and d5. You know, there is always a way to get that d5 push. Chess is sort of a, at least in the opening, is a logical game, and there is always some justice, and whenever white breaks a rule like pushing f5 too early, there is always a punishment for that. So here it's b6, bishop b7, and d5. King h1 is the best move. Again, white wants to always get the king out of the diagonal, just to be safe. Now we play knight c5, applying the pressure on the e4 pawn, and we want to develop our c8 bishop sooner or later. Here white plays queen e1, If white once again pushes with f5, we've got the d5 push, which is very, very nasty. After e takes d5, e4, it will be a fork on the knight and the bishop. So white plays queen e1. That's the idea of the system. He wants to bring the queen to g3 after first taking on e5. Here we have to make a few good moves. We do not want to play bishop e6. Obviously, whenever the pawn is on f4, bishop e6 is met with f5 with a tempo, which is never something we want to allow. So that's always almost always is a rule that we just don't play bishop e6. Bishop is in fact going to be developed via d7, but first we play rook e8. Here it's first of all useful in general in many of these knight positions, or in almost all the knight positions. Rook on e8 is somehow just very useful. Once there starts some action in the center, the knight jumps to d5 or whatever happens, the rook on e8 is always there to start working on the e file. So it's just a very useful move. But also there's a concrete idea that after f5 we have d5, and e takes d5 we have e4, and then after bishop d6, after white captures on e4, we attack the piece on e4 also with the rook, and to win some material there. So rook e8, very strong prophylactic move. Now white goes for f e5, d e5, queen g3. Obviously he needs to capture first, because if he goes queen g3 immediately, there is a knight h5 idea. But after takes queen g3, white attacks the e5 pawn, and he would have some initiative if we would have to defend this pawn. But fortunately we don't. There is a very strong idea in bishop e6, sacrificing the pawn, and it transpires that the position after white captures on e5 is just very good for black. So first of all, knight e5 is not at all an option because of knight h5, and the knight is just lost as the queen has to stop defending it. So instead, white also has the option of knight g5. Now here it's very important to know that allowing the doubled e-pawns is not at all a problem. We take on d3, not to knight e6, f e6. White can take both with the pawn or the queen, but we have to know that these pawns are tremendous even when they're isolated, like here. I learned it the hard way. I remember I had a rapid game as a kid under 12 category, and I took well, I didn't play exactly this line, but I had this position, and I was very surprised. I remember as a youngster, looking at my opponent's pawn structure, thinking I have to be at least not worse, obviously better, because he's got these isolated doubled pawns. But yeah, I realized quite quickly in the game that somehow my knight is now dominated because I don't have this d5 square, and it's just very hard for white to play, and these queenside weaknesses are really there, and it's just a very unpleasant position for white, really. So this is something we should be aware of. These doubled pawns are very good, and the same story is after 17 c takes d3. Here too, we have a very good position. Black plays rook f8. We want to double on the f file, rook f7, rook f8. We might want to activate our e7 bishop with bishop c5, bishop d4 as well. Black is just slightly better here. Instead, we have to address the move queen takes e5, obviously. Now here we play bishop d6. White has to go for queen g5. If he plays queen d4, we can take on d3. C takes d3 is a must. Otherwise, there's bishop c4 after queen d3, bishop c5, and queen e5. And after we trade queens, bring the rook to d8. The d3 pawn is going to fall. Let me color it red. It's just very bad position for white. Despite being a pawn up, white has very, very sad pawn structure. a4, b2 pawns are weak. These squares are weak. d3 pawn is just tremendously weak without the light squared bishop. So such a position or such an endgame is just better for black. And even if we don't win back the pawn immediately, we can never be worse, really. So the better move is 16 queen g5. Now we play h6. Queen has to go to h4, and here we play knight g4. Very important move. Now we guard that e5 square, and h3 is always met by bishop g3. So white is struggling here with ideas, while we want to improve our position with rook a d8. At some point, take on d3 and simply attack the weak d3 pawn. Bishop d2 is the best move. What else to play? Again, h3. We've had this bishop g3 idea. Here we play rook a d8, useful move. And now white has to already be very careful to not get into serious trouble. He should play knight d5 and simplify the position as much as possible. We take on d5, e takes d5, take the bishop as well, knight d3, c d3, and now we play knight e5. And white has a very, very poor pawn structure. The pawns d5 and d3 are weak. b2, a4 pawns are also awkward. And in this position, despite being a pawn down, it is black who is slightly better. And this happened in a correspondent game between Vecek and Miners in 2010, in an old correspondent game, but very well played by black. So I believe this is a good way to handle this f4 system. Once again, the main line is knight f3. Then after knight b7, a4, we play queen c7 first, stopping bishop c4, and then it's important here to play rook e8 after queen e1, and after fed, queen g3, no, this pawn sacrifice with bishop e6. Just very comfortable variation for black, but we have to know this. It's not so simple. If you, for example, try to defend the e5 pawn, you will start uncoordinating your pieces, and then white gets some initiative along the f file. So definitely a system to be aware of, but once we know what we're doing, I believe just very, very comfortable play for black. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.